I am Ilona and I am Latvian. And yes, I was looking again into my 23andMe historical matches. I do look at them from time to time, and now I feel like I want to talk more detail about each of these people, uh, out of personal interest, and of course maybe some can find this information useful. So what I noticed is are these Swedish warriors buried in a ship. Well, two ships actually. Yes, not in Sweden. Yes, Swedish warriors. Sorry, not in Sweden, but on the Baltic island, in Baltic Sea, like over 1,000 years ago. What was it at the time when Vikings were not very well known and popular, but actually. It's not like they just appeared out of nowhere near that monastery in England. Obviously, they existed before, so this is kind of like Vikings before they became popular. And I had so many questions. So, what happens there? How and why did they die? And why is this kind of burial not at home in Sweden, but here on someone else's island? And I wanted to know more. So this is where they were found on this island, which is Saaremaa. This is now part of Estonia, and yes, it's not very far from Sweden. Of course, it's not like it's so crazy and unbelievable. Why? What happened? But well, still, there is a story, and in that 750 year, everything was different. This island, there was no obviously Estonia as we know it today at that time. Yes, there were Estonians, but yeah, this island, what I found out, had its own people. They had their own identity, culture, rules, even I think they still have their own dialect, probably, but at that time also. So they were a little bit different than my mainland Estonians. And at some point, this 41 men from Sweden arrived to that island, and yeah, they never left. We don't know what exactly happened, and probably never will. But we know more than you might expect. The people of Saaremaa at the time, I don't know if they called themselves Australian, something like that. I don't think so. Most likely someone else they called that way, or I don't know. They were not Estonians, like how we understand it today. They did spoke a Finnic language related to Estonian and Finnish. But yes, they had their own identity, their own gods, their own way of organizing themselves, and that organization is interesting. There were no kings here. Power sat with councils of elders. The families competed for influence. This is their supreme god. Actually, that's another interesting story. Actually, so I don't know how to pronounce Tarapita, let's say it like that way. A thunder deity connected in some accounts to a meteor. Yes, that struck the island centuries earlier, leaving a crater you can still visit today. And whether that connection is real or legend, we can't say for sure, but I kind of feel like, most likely, but okay, that story for maybe another video. So this really tells something about these people, so their ancestors saw it, because actually what I found on a map, uh, I don't, yes, I have to investigate more about this, but there were probably more than just one crater, but at least one crater is not so far from that place where these ships were found. So yeah, that's interesting. Later sources, which were written around 400 to 500 years after this story I am telling now, described these people, Australians, as feared maritime riders. Scandinavian sagas called them Vikings from Estonia. Chronicles describe their fleets terrorizing the Swedish coast in their ships. So they were not like just some kind of peasants. of course, these sources come much later and written by outsiders. German missionaries, Scandinavian court writers, with their own reasons for telling the story a certain way. Whether the oscillions of 750 year looked exactly like this, we cannot know. 500 years? Well, 500 years. That's a, well, still, that's a time period in which a lot of things can change. But, well, most likely, as we know that they managed to kill so many people on that island who came from Sweden, who were also some kind of warriors. Of course, also at that time, they knew how to protect themselves. Anyway, yeah. What we can say is, yes, Saaremaa at that time was home to a proud, independent maritime people. Most likely, anyone who crossed that water to reach this island was entering a world with its own rules. Yeah. Now look at this burial itself. So how it looked. The Australians didn't just dump these men in a pit. They placed them carefully in their own shops. And yes, I don't know who did it actually. It could be also someone else there. The people who survived, but still they were let to do that. They were not killed, and they were allowed to do that. So yes, they placed them in their ships, but they were surrounded by their own weapons and personal possessions. Four brothers were laid side by side, really buried like someone important, even. I don't know if it was some kind of a regular enemy attacking you. Would you bother? And look at the DNA. Among these 41 men, five carry Y chromosome, haplogroup N, lineage. That doesn't originate in Sweden. It originates in the Baltic and Finnic world, the same world as Saaremaa. These men were culturally Swedish, most likely raised in the Malaren Valley, as strong to isotypes confirmed. But their paternal ancestors came from the east. Again, this old haplogroups, we don't know how many years ago. It could be a few or even one generation away, or 1,000 years, few thousand years maybe. I don't know. Yes, this information is still useful and important because that shows that some kind of mixing was happening in that area. Okay, what I think maybe probably happened. Imagine, for example, uh, two families were connected. And in Sweden, I think they had similar style of ruling. But okay, let's talk about just Saaremaa. There are many families. That island is not so small, actually. So there are multiple families. And well, maybe even each of these families had some kind of connections to a lot of other people, maybe. But let's say there were two families, one in Sweden and another on Saaremaa. These families were connected. Uh, Maybe few generations ago, like there were mixed family, for example, mother and father, grandparents of some other mixed of their descendants. For example, on that island lived children or maybe already grown up people who were descendants of this mixed family, and they were related to these people from Sweden who arrived. Well, maybe distantly related, or I don't know. Uh, so they could be like partly Swedish, partly, well, okay, let's say Estonians for to make it simpler. And some other family, like kind of like, well, maybe not necessarily rival, but when you live in a community, you will not always agree altogether with everything. And maybe this another family was like, no, I don't like where it's going. This is not okay. This family, what they are doing, we don't like it. This or that is happening because of them. And there they form this other like this more like secret group who go against that one family, which was what maybe even gaining more power or something like that. And these visitors from Sweden, they arrive and maybe they arrived with the family without any idea what awaits them. Uh, so this could be also one of the reasons why they were buried the way they were, because maybe on that island still were people who were related to them, like to some extent, but they were still locals. And we don't know if that local family was killed, because it also could happen that even all this local family were killed. But if they were, then obviously they were buried by local tradition. So that's why they are not on the ship. Yeah, this is my idea what could possibly happen. Or it could be, yes, another alliance between two different families, one on Saaremaa, one in the Sweden area, against these two families also. Or mistake. Or they were lost somewhere in the sea. These things happen and just had to stop at this particular island. Also possible. Yeah, that's my opinion. What could possibly go wrong? Thanks for watching and goodbye.